Hi everyone, it's Elliot from the Pear-Shaped team. Today I'm going to talk about careers, and specifically the career that I've had, the pros and cons of having that career, and maybe some thoughts around that.
New car. What do you think?
So I've worked in investment banking for the last 6 years. I've worked specifically in mergers and acquisitions. It is a very highly competitive and energetic field with lots of ups and downs. I wanted to share with you my top pros and cons. Investment banking is highly competitive. The feeling of getting in through a long series of exams and interviews can be really exciting. It's a real good testament when you're early on in your career of that feeling of success, that you've actually made it through a very competitive field and you're one of the best of the best.
Boy, Captain America over here. Best of the best of the best, sir.
Another really great thing about working in this field is that you learn so much about the goings-on of a business and how that business fits into the wider scheme of things. You get to have really in-depth conversations with the top management of these businesses. You learn so much about economics, the way the world is working, current events, and how that all plays out on the business that you might be looking at. For example, you maybe talk to the CFO and also talk to the operation leads. And you'll also see from a commercial point of view, the sales and the marketing as well. So it's very exciting to see the full component of how you run a business. The last thing I'll say is the pay. Stereotypically, people talk about Wall Street and investment banking as being associated with having larger bonuses. And that's usually related to the transactions that you work on. If you're working on some large and exciting projects, that may be tied to having a larger paycheck when it comes to bonus time. In my personal experience, I've seen both sides of it. I've seen there have been dry years where because the personal performance of your team hasn't been that great, you may not be making as much as you'd like to. And I've also seen those nicer years where you have worked and you've closed a few deals, you worked a lot of hours, and you may be remunerated for that. So that was about 3, maybe 4 pros. I'd like to go into my cons list, which unfortunately happens to be a bit longer. From my own personal experience, by no means meant to be a wider commentary, this is just from what I've seen.
What we do here is go back.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Con number 1, and the most obvious one, is the long hours. So for your first 3 years as an investment banker, you should be prepared to be spending a lot of hours in the office, sign away your life essentially. It's a lot of work and you'll be probably having to sacrifice on many other components in your life. For me, the first 3 years were very intense. I practically lived at the office. I've had to give up a lot of social hours. I certainly had a lot of sacrifices I had to make, and even family vacations, holidays, going back home for once a year, I had to sacrifice a few of those as well. The next con I'll talk about is the negative stigma. In the name itself, investment banker, you have the word banker, which unfortunately around lots of parts of the world has a negative connotation. It's important to point out that as an investment banker, you're not actually doing banking. You're not a banker, but it's in the title, and it is something that you'll have to explain to everyone who's not in your industry. You also have a lot of problems trying to explain what it is that you do to people who may not be in finance or closely related to what you're doing. When you go to social events or you're talking to friends who may not know what you do, it doesn't seem to translate very well. I've personally experienced social gatherings, get-togethers, barbecues, where people have asked me what I've done. I've tried to say the word investment banking and have been met with probably not the most pleasant responses. Banking is the devil. The next con I'll talk about is one I used in the pros section, and that is the pay. As you advance, the pay can actually be quite good, but it's in the early years when you're spending a lot of time at the office when the pay can be actually unappealing. Depending on how many hours you're working and the projects you're working on that year, you may, on a $1 per hour basis, be taking home less than minimum wage. So you may have to ask yourself, if it's the money that you're worried about in the first 3 years, what are you doing this for? And if it's on a $1 per hour basis, maybe your time can be spent better elsewhere. If you're willing to put in the time for the potential of future earnings, then it can be the career for you. The next point I'll talk about is unfortunately the ego. Investment banking is unfortunately associated with a certain kind of personality which can be quite negative. Whether it's because of the high pressure environment, the so-called complexity of the job, or the remuneration, it attracts a certain kind of individual that is based in ego. Now, in my experience, for the most part, the majority of people working in this field happen to be just like myself, nice, average people. But I have experienced people who take the megalomaniacal part of it too far. I've seen pretty bad behavior, whether it's shouting down the phone or berating people in public. I've gotten drunken calls at all hours of the night from directors. I've had people shout at me, send terrible emails, demand things at any hour of the day, simply because they could. And in the end, it was actually no more beneficial for the project or delivering the project than if it were done without. My take is professionalism is professionalism. Leave all the emotions at the door or at home. If you happen to be one of those kinds of people where emotion takes over and you react poorly and stressed, this career is definitely not for you, because you need to be one of these people who can stay calm under fire. There are a lot of high intense pressured moments where you're trying to deliver something quickly, or it's an ad hoc request and it has to be done yesterday, but doing so with a professional manner and keeping calm under pressure is one of the most important characteristics you can have in this field. So if you'd like to learn more about this, life lessons from an investment banker, I've written a blog post about this. It's in the description below, just click the link. So there you have it, the pros and cons as an investment banker from a seasoned career professional. I hope that's been helpful. If it's been something that you've gone through yourself or you have a differing view, feel free to hit the comments below.